So this evening we will start chapter 7 and chant the first 10 shlokas of chapter 7. Bhagavata Narayana Swayam Vyasena Gratitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Ritavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Amba Tvam Anusandadhami Bhagavad Gita Bhavadveshinim Vasudeva Sutan Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadguru Mukam Karoti Vachalam Bangum Langhayate Girim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Paramananda Madhavam Om Atham Saptamodhyayaha Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Maya Saktamana Partha Yogam Yunjanvarashrayaha Asamshayam Samagram Mam Yatha Jnasyasi Tatshrinu Jnanam Teham Savijnanam Hidam Vaksham Yasheshataha Yajñātvā deha bhūyoņat jñātavyam avashishyate Manushyanam sahasreshu kaschid yatatat siddhaye Yatatam api siddhanam kaschin mam vetti tattvataha Bhūmirapo nalo vāyu Kammano buddhirevacha Ahampāra iti yammam bhinna prakritirashtadha Apareyamitasthanyam prakritim vidhi param Jiva bhutam mahabāho Yayedam dharyate jagat Etadiyonini bhutani sarvani tyupadharaya Aham kritsnasya jagata prabhava pralayastatha Mattah parataram nanyat kinchidasti dhananjaya Mai sarvamidam brotam sutre manigana eva Prasohamapsu kaunteya prabhasmi shashi suryayoh Pranavah sarva vedeshu shabdah ke paurusham rishu Punyo gandha prativyam cha tejas chasmi vibhavasavo Jivanam sarva bhuteshu tapaschasmi tapasvishu Bijam mam sarva bhutanam vidhi partha sanatanam Buddhir buddhimatam asmi tejas tejasvinamaham So this evening we'll continue with our study of the Bhagavad Gita. And last time we came to the end of chapter 6. So I want to go over the last couple of verses, which we did very quickly, and then a subject which came several verses earlier that I wanted to mention something about also. So in fact, let me just say a little bit about chapter 6 and then the theme that I wanted to comment on, and then the last two verses, then we'll start on 7. So chapter 6 again is the chapter on on meditation, what we know as Raja Yoga, the path of control of the mind. And the first 9 verses, Sri Krishna talks about the ideal state of mind attained by the karma yogi. So for the third part of the second, and then the third, fourth, and fifth chapters deal largely with karma yoga. In fact, some say, with the reason, that the first 6 chapters deal largely with karma yoga, because the first chapter about Arjuna's dilemma about whether to fight or not to fight. So that also comes under karma yoga, the doubts of Arjuna. And so in the beginning of the 6th chapter, Sri Krishna continues the theme of karma yoga, and that's the tie-in to meditation, because he talks about the state of perfection where the mind is under complete control. And then he says, for such a one, the path becomes the establishment of the mind in complete calmness, which comes about through Raja Yoga, through the control of the mind. And then in the rest of the chapter, he talks about the practice and the state of yoga. So one of the themes that I wanted to say a little bit about is something that is not one of the most important themes in the 6th chapter, but it is something I did want to mention, and that is where he talks about the second question of Arjuna, where Arjuna, towards the end of chapter 6, where Arjuna says that what happens to the person who neither attains to enjoyment of the world nor to perfection? Are they like a cloud which breaks apart without giving any rain? That is, the person who has said, okay, I want to attain to spirituality, so let me give up as much as I can the enjoyments of the world and put my mind on the attainment of enlightenment. But then they don't attain to anything. So what happens to such a person? So Sri Krishna talks about the what's technically known as the yoga bhrashta, the person who has fallen from the state of yoga. Now, usually, yoga bhrashta, the term fallen from yoga, one who has fallen from yoga, is used for a person who was following the spiritual path, but then had a moral lapse, a serious moral lapse, which swerved them away from the path of yoga. And of course, the scriptures are full of such examples, and modern life is full of such examples of many people who were even advanced spiritual aspirants who seemed to have everything going for them in the spiritual life, and then suddenly they're attracted by something and they're off in a different direction, and their spiritual life seems to be lost. So that's usually what is called a yoga bhrashta. Here in the 6th chapter, it just means someone who doesn't complete the attainment of spirituality. They begin on the path, but they don't come to a transformative experience. So what happens to them? So I just wanted to say, just for interest's sake, because it's part of the tradition of yoga, part of the Hindu tradition and the Vedanta tradition, about the yoga bhrashta, the one who falls from the path. What Sri Krishna says as an answer, that applies to such a person too. One who falls from the path of yoga, that is somebody who gets swerved away, attracted away from the path of yoga, and ends up in a life of very ordinary worldliness. Then such a person also, it's said that whatever a person has attained to in the spiritual life, that is never lost. If you fall from the path of yoga, you give up the spiritual path, and you become absorbed in ordinary or even degenerate life, then such a person also, after some time, they will come back to the spiritual path. And what they have done in the past, that won't be lost. Yes, for some time they may have to suffer because ordinary life means suffering. And so if you fall from the spiritual path and you get absorbed into worldliness, then once again you're going to have to suffer. And you'll even have to suffer more, or I shouldn't say you, I should say such a person has to suffer even more, because knowledge brings responsibility. I'm sure all of you have seen the first Spider-Man movie. In the first Spider-Man movie, then the uncle of Spider-Man tells him that with great power comes great responsibility. And that's true of great knowledge also. With great knowledge comes great responsibility. And so if you know what the goal of life is, if you come to the point where you understand what the goal of life is, you know that you've seen the emptiness of ordinary life, the lack of any sort of fulfillment there, and you've gone forward in the spiritual life, and then you give that up, then the pain of that fall is much greater than the ordinary person experiences even in an ordinary degenerate life, because such a person doesn't know anything else, they have no comparison. But a person who has gone forward on the spiritual path and then they fall away completely, then the suffering for such a person is even greater. There's an amusing, not amusing in the sense of laughing out loud amusing, it's not a joke, but it's a story told about missionaries, Christian missionaries who went to Alaska. That's very revealing in this regard. The missionaries went to Alaska and were long back, and were teaching the Inuit, the so-called Eskimos. We're teaching them about Jesus and how Jesus died for your sins and all of that, and that if you accept, of course, going through the long story, which I won't go through, that Jesus died for your sins. If you accepted Jesus as your Savior, then you will go to heaven. So the Inuit leader said, well, what happens if you don't accept Jesus? And then you'll go to hell, and you'll have to suffer for eternity. You'll go through eternal suffering for not accepting Jesus. And then the Inuit leader said, but what happens to those who have never heard about Jesus? So then the missionary said, well, for those, God in his infinite compassion, he will take into account their ignorance and not punish them for their ignorance, because they had no chance to hear of the saving power of Jesus' name. So the Inuit said, then why the hell did you tell me about it? If I was okay with not knowing, and now you've told me about it, and I'm going to go to hell for all eternity if I don't accept it, then what kind of benefit have you given me? So, not taking the side of the missionary at all. I don't take his side at all in that, but it does illustrate a point in an indirect and somewhat perverse way, that with knowledge there is responsibility. And so with the spiritual knowledge, and I'm not talking about an inquirer or somebody who's tried out meditation and find it's not for them, there's no harm in that. But for a person who has gone far on the spiritual path, and then they're spurred away from it and fall back into extreme worldliness. So, but it's said in the tradition that such a person, that they may, depending on how far they fall and how badly they fall, they may have to come back in a painful birth. In fact, there's the tradition that many come back as dogs or cats, especially dogs, come back as dogs and spend a life in that form, and then they're reborn and continue their path of yoga. And there are many reasons why that is, or there are many examples shown to illustrate that. For instance, Swami Vivekananda, he had a dog at Bellarmine. After he returned to India the last time, he had many pets, and among the pets was a dog. And that dog was very unusual. It wouldn't eat anything on Ekadashi days. And it would go every day down to the Ghat and bathe in the Ganges. and it would take guests who had to go to the latrine at night, because in those days there was only a latrine outside, an outhouse. It would take them to the latrine and look for snakes to make sure there were no cobras. It was in the land of cobras, to make sure there were no poisonous snakes. After Swamiji passed away, the dogs did something. I don't know. Never heard what exactly the dog did, but it said did something that dogs do, but which annoyed everybody greatly. They thought it was a very bad dog, and so somebody was told to take the dog to Calcutta and leave it a long way from Bellarmine. So they did, and then a short time later, here's the dog coming back into the gate. And even when the dog died, then somebody said, well, it's just a dog, let's throw it into the Ganges. So they threw it into the Ganges. And then after some time, it was found that it washed back up onto the Ghat at Bellarmine. It didn't wash down the Ganges. And so then they threw it in again. And then after some hours, they found it had washed up on the Ghat again. A third time, they threw it in, and it came back to the same Ghat, the dead body. So after that, they realized their mistake, and so they gave it a formal cremation and all ceremonies and so forth. But there are many examples like that. We had a dog in Ganges, Michigan, where I joined, where I was first in the order. And Susie, she was just a stray who wandered into the ashram. But whenever Swami Bhashyanandaji would come up from Chicago to Ganges to give us the Upanishad class, he would come up on Wednesday and Wednesday morning and stay till Friday morning. So Thursday morning and Friday morning, he would give an Upanishad class. And so Susie would come without fail to the Upanishad class and lie there at the Swami's feet throughout the class. And when the class was over, she would get up and walk away. But there are many things like that she used to do. Once a funny incident, funny if you'd seen it, it was funny, or maybe you'll be grossed out by it, I don't know. But one of our brahmacharis was walking down the path and saw Susie struggling in the bushes. And so he called, saw Susie's rear end sticking out of the bushes, and so he called Susie. And so Susie looked around and looked as innocent as a dog can possibly look. And out of her mouth were two baby rabbit legs kicking like that. And Susie looked as if nothing had happened. But of course, the rabbit's legs were giving away what she had just done. So anyway, that's about the yoga prashna that many times is. Oh, you know the story of Jadabharata. Jadabharata, who was first King Bharata, and who in his old age, he retired from his kingdom and went to the forest and began to practice severe austerities for the realization of God. And there he saw a deer one day, a baby deer, and he took it, adopted it, and brought it up, and became so in love with the deer that he spent all of his time caring for the deer, worrying about it, caring for it, seeing that it was fed, protecting it, and so forth. And so his tapasya, his spiritual practice, practically ended because he was absorbed in worrying about the deer, and then he died. And because of that, he had to be reborn as the traditions, the story tells, the tale tells, had to be reborn as a deer and spent a life as a deer. And then he came back again as a man. And in that next life, he attained to enlightenment. But anyway, I just wanted to say that about the yoga prashna, because in our order also, we have the tradition of several starting with Swamiji's dog, with examples of several animals that showed the qualities of having been yogis at one time. Ramana Maharshi, a great illumined soul, he had extraordinary experiences with animals that the people witnessed. It was well recorded, the extraordinary experiences he had with them. And so that it's a living tradition. So then I said, go over the last two verses just very briefly, 46 and 47 of chapter 6. And 46, I'll just read the English. A yogi is higher than men of austerity. He is considered higher even than men of knowledge, that is, intellectual knowledge. The yogi is also higher than men of action. Therefore, O Arjuna, do you become a yogi? So that's sort of the conclusion. These two verses are the conclusion of chapter 6. And so here, after telling about yoga, he tells them the glory of yoga, that the yogi is higher than all other aspirants. Now, that doesn't mean that Raja Yoga is higher than the other three yogas. It means that one who has attained to the state of yoga through any of the yogas is higher than pundits, people of knowledge, higher than people of action, higher than people who just practice austerities for the attainment of psychic powers and so forth. The yogi is the highest of all living beings. And then 47, he says, Yoginam api sarvesham madgaten tantaratmana shraddhavan bhajate yo mam same yuktatamo mataha. So yoginam api sarvesham, among all of the yogis, madgaten antaratmana, the one whose mind is absorbed in me, shraddhavan, who is filled with faith. Yo mam bhajate sa me yuktatamo mataha. The one who worships me with the mind absorbed in me and filled with faith. He is the greatest of the yogis. So as the translation here has it, in relation to all of the yogis without exception, yoginam api, he who adores me with his mind fixed on me and with faith, he is in my estimation the best of the yogis. So that's a transitional verse again. Again, the first 9 verses of chapter 6 transitional from the topic of karma yoga into the meditation. And this verse is a transition from chapter 6 to chapters 7 through 12. According to Madhusudana Saraswati, the first 6 chapters are about the self, the who you are. You know, in the famous statement, Tattvamasi, thou art that. There's Tat, that. There's Tvam, you, the individual soul, and Asi, the equation between the two. You are that. You are that infinite cosmic reality. And so Madhusudana says the first 6 chapters deal with Tvam, thou. And the next 6 chapters through chapter 12, which is the chapter on Bhakti Yoga, deal with Tat, that is with God. With the cosmic being, the divine cosmic being. And the last 6 chapters deal with their equation. And so now in chapter 7, we see how it begins with the greater emphasis on God. So now in the first 6 chapters, of course, Sri Krishna talks about himself some also. For instance, in chapter 4, there are several verses where he speaks of himself as God. But the emphasis certainly is on knowing who you are. The individual, knowing that I am the self. I'm without birth, without death, without action, etc. And when the mind is completely stilled, then I attain to that knowledge of who I am. And the last verse of this chapter, chapter 6, which I just read, says, in relation to all the yogis without exception, he who adores me, that is Bhagavan, me the Lord, I God, who worships me, the divine, with his mind fixed on me, Sri Krishna, and with faith, he is in my estimation the best of the yogis. So when a Christian says that Jesus says that he's the way, the truth, and the life, the Hindu response to that is that yes, that's true. Sri Krishna says the same thing. But when Sri Krishna says it, he doesn't mean it in an exclusive way, that I, Sri Krishna, am the way, the truth, and the life, and you can't get there through any other great soul. No, but I, as God, am the way, the truth, and the life. But in whatever form you come to God, that is also true. So Jesus also is the way, the truth, and the life, and only through him does one come to the Father. That is, only by knowing the cosmic reality as manifest in a person of God, like Sri Krishna, Sri Rama, Jesus, Buddha, Sri Ramakrishna, the Holy Mother. Only through such a one does one come to the knowledge of the infinite. And so then we begin chapter 7. Chapter 7 is Jnana Vijnana Nama Saptamodhyayaha. The 7th chapter, known as the chapter on knowledge and realization. Jnana, knowledge, and Vijnana, which means Vishishta Jnana, special knowledge, which is realization. So it begins, Sri Bhagavan Uvacha, Maya Sakta Mana Partha Yogam Yunjan Marashrayah Asamshayam Samagram Mam Yathajnasyasi Tachrinu. So, Maya Asakta Mana Partha, O Partha, one who practices yoga with their mind in me, taking refuge in me, madashraya, mai asaktamana, with the mind attached to me. Asamshayamam samagram mam yatha jnasasi tachrinu. How such a one can know me completely and without doubt by practicing yoga, that shrinu. Hear that, O Arjuna. So here in the running translation, O Partha, hear how you, whose mind is fixed on me and who have taken refuge in me, will know me without doubt and in full by practicing yoga. So again, here Sri Krishna speaking of himself as God, as the divine. And that again is the prerogative of every avatara, every incarnation of God. Because the difference in the Hindu tradition between an avatara and a jiva, an ordinary individual like us, is that we're born through the force of karma. Past karma causes us to be born in the circumstances we are born in. But the incarnation is one who already knows their identity with God, who's born out of compassion for suffering humanity, in order to lead them back to their own knowledge of divinity. And so, Partha, hear how you, whose mind is fixed on me and who have taken refuge in me, will know me without doubt and in full, samagram, by practicing yoga. Yogam yunjan, by practicing yoga. So here Sri Krishna is giving a promise that one who keeps their mind fixed on God, who takes refuge in God, and practices yoga, that is, practices spiritual discipline, that they can know God in full and without any doubt. So that's a promise coming from the divine itself. So this is, you could say, the beginning of bhakti yoga in the Gita. The first 6 chapters speak a lot about action, and they also speak a lot about self-knowledge. Sri Krishna, as I've said many times in this class, he begins the Gita by an appeal to self-knowledge. Know who you are. Know that you are the Atman, that you are without birth, without death, without action, that nothing in the world can really affect you. You think that you are affected by things because you identify with the body and mind, which are affected by things because the body is part of all of this and the mind is part of the cosmic mind. And both are buffeted by the waves at the physical and at the mental level. And so, yes, the body and mind are affected, but you're beyond the body and mind. And once you know that, then you're beyond the reach of suffering. So, of course, knowing that sufficiently so that we're beyond the reach of suffering, that's a very high state. That's a state of realization. But even for us who are on the path, even when we're on the path, to know that as a matter of conviction, that itself gives us great consolation. One of the 5 people that I knew in my that I've known in this life who knew Swami Vivekananda. One of them was somebody we called Prasanna. Her name was Catherine Whitmarsh, an American lady who was part of the Leggett family. And she had lived being part of the Leggett family, she was a niece of Mr. Leggett by his first marriage. And, or actually not by any marriage. She was blood related to Mr. Leggett, not to Mrs. Betty Leggett. So she, when she was a little child, she stayed at Ridgely in the summer times. And so when Swami Vivekananda was there in the summer of 1899, she was there also. Swamiji blessed her. He pronounced Sanskrit over her. And she became a devotee. She lived much of her adult life in Santa Barbara, just across the street from our convent. And her house now belongs to the convent. And so I knew her quite well. Whenever I would go to Santa Barbara to speak, she would invite me over for tea and for talks. And she, in her old age, she was in a wheelchair because of arthritis, and extremely painful. She had very bad arthritis in her large joints, wheelchair bound. And so she used to tell me that the only thing that gives me relief from the pain, because medicine, after a while, the medicine wouldn't give relief. She said, the only thing that gives me relief is the knowledge that I'm not the body. That's the only thing that gives me relief. And so just putting that, and she wasn't a realized soul. She was a very good devotee, very fine devotee, but not a realized soul. But just that conviction that I'm not the body allowed her to see the pain as an object, as something that was different from her. It's not that I am hurting, it's that I see pain. I can see that there is pain in the body. And so to continually try to objectify it, to make it, to see that it's something different from her, something that she's perceiving, but not who she is. That was the only relief that she got. So, verse 2 says, Jnanam teham savijnanam idam vakshyam yasheshatah yajñatva neha bhuyon yat jnatavyam avashishyate. Jnanam aham te jnanam savijnanam Vakshami asheshatah. I will tell you completely about knowledge and realization. Yajñatva neha bhuyon yat jnatavyam avashishyate. Knowing which nothing else here remains to be known. I'll tell you that by knowing which nothing else remains to be known. So I shall tell you, the running translation here is, I shall tell you in detail of this knowledge that is combined with realization, jnana savijnana, after experiencing which there remains nothing else here to be known again. And so then verse 3 begins that process. Manushyanam sahasreshu kaschid yatate siddhaye yatatam api siddhanam kaschin mam vetti tattvataha. So this is very similar to a verse in chapter 2, somewhere around 27 or 28, verse 27 or 28, somewhere in there in chapter 2. Here it's Manushyanam sahasreshu kaschid yatati siddhaye. Among thousands of people, perhaps one strives for perfection. Kaschid yatati siddhaye. Perhaps just one, maybe one person out of thousands of people strives for perfection. And that we see the truth of that. Now, Sri Krishna was talking at a time long back, which was the end of the Vedic age, when still there were the whole society was oriented towards the spiritual life. And even then, he said, among thousands, there's only one who strives for perfection. So today we could perhaps say among hundreds of thousands or maybe millions, there's one who strives for perfection. Probably not, maybe not millions, but certainly hundreds of thousands, there's one perhaps who strives for perfection. Yatatam api siddhanam kaschin mam vetti tattvataha. And among those who strive and among the siddhanam, the perfected ones, perhaps one knows me in truth. So among thousands, there's perhaps one who strives for perfection. And among those who attain to perfection, perhaps there's one who knows me in truth. And so he's talking about the rarity of very high spirituality. And so that's something that we have to know in the spiritual life. It's an uncomfortable truth, and one that causes many people to give up, thinking that, well, if it's so rare to attain to the heights of spirituality, what's the use? The use is that there's nothing else. There's nothing else. The other use is that every step you take in that direction is a blessing. Every step in that direction will make you a better person. The quality of your life will be better. The quality of your mind, the quality of your experience will be better. And so there is a value in striving for perfection, even though full attainment of the highest perfection is rare. But I myself have seen many people, many devotees who are very ordinary people, not high-class spiritual aspirants by any means, but ordinary people who tried their best according to their capacity in spiritual life, who by the end of their life was transformed. Life was transformed. And sometimes you didn't see it until their very old age. But it was seen in the old age because that change had been going on for years and years. It was just in old age that came to fruition. And so, yes, the attainment of Nirvikalpa Samadhi, the highest illumination, that's very rarely seen in any generation. There are only a handful of people in the whole world who attain to that in any generation. So if you think in terms of Nirvikalpa Samadhi, yes, the outlook is not good. And those who attain it are extraordinary people from their youth, usually. That's very rare that somebody who sort of stumbles into it. That just doesn't happen. It's extraordinary people who attain to the highest heights of spirituality. But many attain to a spiritual state. Not the highest heights. And that's what Sri Krishna is saying, that even among the perfected ones, there's perhaps one who knows me in truth. Sri Ramakrishna and the Holy Mother both used to say that some sages are like someone who has heard the ocean from a distance. They begin to smell the salt air and hear the rumble of the waves from a distance. Others have come closer and seen the ocean. Some others have come onto the shore and seen it up close. A few have actually dipped into the ocean, but a very rare one knows the ocean itself. And so that is the goal of all of us, to know the ocean itself. But the fact is that the complete identity with the ocean itself, that happens rarely. The full knowledge of the ocean, the complete identity with it, that happens rarely. But that doesn't mean that the path is hopeless for the rest of us. No, we can attain to a spiritual state. Even ordinary people can attain to a spiritual state. They can attain to a state that is far above what they have ordinarily. And if we do that, then at the time of death, then we have what is either Videha Mukti, that is, we attain to the final realization at the moment of death, which some people have, or we have what is called Krama Mukti, gradual liberation. That is, we go to a spiritual realm, the heavenly realms that the mystics in all traditions have spoken about. Now, what most people in different religions speak about when they speak of heaven, they mean a family reunion where they go and see grandma and grandpa and people that had died in the family before them, and they sit around and talk to them and have a good time and everything, and they're all happy and all of that. There is said to be such a world. There is such a world where ordinary people go when they die. But when mystics speak of a heavenly world, they're speaking of Brahma Loka or Satya Loka, the very high, rarefied realm where one enters into a deep state of meditation and there lives for a long age in a deeply spiritual state. And then at the end of a cycle of creation, they attain to the very highest spiritual knowledge. And so many attain to that. Many attain to that. So it's the spiritual life is not hopeless. All of us can attain to something. And all of us, if we just stay with spiritual life to the extent that we're capable of doing, will attain to something. We'll attain to some steadiness of mind, steadiness of heart, and so forth. And some more will, at the time of death, have a glorious experience. And then others will attain to what is krama mukti. And then still others who don't attain to either of those, then they come back, as Sri Ramakrishna promised, to a rebirth in circumstances propitious for rapid spiritual development. So if a person in this life makes rapid spiritual development, it's not because they're better than we are or they belong to a different class of humanity than us. It's because they had done their work already. And so in this life, they moved quickly ahead because much of the obstacles they had gotten over in previous lives, much of the suffering that their karma was to bring on them for past actions, that was already gone through. And so in this life, their path is smooth. So both the Holy Mother and Sri Ramakrishna said that those who took refuge in them, that their path would be smooth, not because they have favorites. No, they came for the whole world. But because of their spiritual power and because of our openness to their influence, that their influence could work in us. We are the ones who say no to the divine. We're the ones who close the door to the divine. It's not that God's door is closed to us. We've closed the door to God. And so our task is to learn to open that door and find the one who is already waiting for us before we even knew that there was someone to look for. So spiritual life, the heights of spiritual life where one attains to a state of complete jivan mukti, liberation while living. There are few in every generation, there are few, but only a few in the world. But spirituality is open to all. A person like Ramana Maharshi, a great soul. What to speak of the direct disciples of Ramakrishna. But Ramana Maharshi, who was not an Ishwara Koti or anything like that, he was a person who was born, but who at the age of 16 attained to realization without even looking for it. Without practicing any discipline. Just he attained to the highest illumination and lived until he was 70, from the time he was 16 until he was 70, in a state of the highest illumination. And many, many people, including many of our swamis of the Ramakrishna mission, went to him to pay respects and to hear his wisdom. But such a person had undoubtedly finished everything in a previous life. There was just some slight thread of karma that remained that they had to come back for, and that was quickly finished just in the course of normal 16 years of life. And then he attained to the highest illumination and lived in that state. So that type of realization is rare. But that doesn't mean spirituality isn't open to us. It's open to all of us. Sri Ramakrishna says in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna that everyone, without exception, no matter what a person has done in their life, everyone without exception can realize the self in this very life. He says through prayer, through sincere prayer, everyone can realize the self in this very life. So here among thousands of men, and of course it means people, a rare one endeavors for perfection. Even of the perfected ones who are diligent, one perchance knows me in truth. And verse 4, Bhumirapo nalo vayu kammano buddhireva cha ahangara iti yamme bhinna prakritirashtadha. So here he speaks of his eightfold prakriti meaning his nature, the eightfold prakriti. And in this verse, he's speaking about his, what he will call in the next verse, his lower prakriti. And in that verse, he will speak about his higher prakriti also. So here he's talking about his nature as manifested in this universe, in us, the individuals. Because we are the prakriti of God. We are the nature of God. And so he says that this prakriti of mind, this nature of mind, is divided eightfold thus: earth, water, fire, air, space, mind, intellect, and egoism. So he's naming the traditional 5 elements, and also 3 of the 4 aspects of mind. Why doesn't he name the 4th? Well, of course, because the 4th is included in the 3. The ego, mind, intellect, and chitta. Chitta is the mind stuff. That is the stuff of the mind which takes these other 3 forms. So that's included. When you name these 3, you're including the chitta. So he's talking about the elements which go to comprise the mind, the body, and the sense organs, plus the different aspects of the mind. This is my eightfold prakriti as manifested in an individual. Now the commentators, Madhusudana, Sureshwara, Shankaracharya, and others, they explain this differently from the way I'm explaining it. And I'm explaining it my way because I like my way. So let me explain why I'm explaining it my way and what the difference is. The traditional acharyas, they thought that, well, Sri Krishna is talking about his prakriti, his nature, and so he must mean the whole of his prakriti. And so there's the avyakta, the unmanifested, and then there's the cosmic mind, and then there's the different layers which in the Sankhya philosophy and the yoga philosophy are called the 24 cosmic principles. And so those must all be included in this, because why would Sri Krishna be leaving some things out? And so taking that stand, they say that when Sri Krishna says here ahamkara, egoism, he doesn't mean ahamkara. He means the buddhi, which is the source of the ahamkara. And when he says buddhi, he doesn't mean buddhi, because now that's already taken over by ahamkara. He means the avyakta. And so they take the things that Sri Krishna is saying and say, well, he doesn't really mean that, he means something else. And now this next one, that's already been cut out, but there's something else. So it doesn't mean that, so it means something else still. And so this very convoluted way of explaining. My feeling is that a great teacher like Sri Krishna and Sri Ramakrishna and other great teachers like Jesus, etc., they don't speak in puzzles. They don't try to confuse people. They don't try to speak in things that need extremely long commentaries to say, well, this doesn't really mean this, it means that, and this doesn't really mean that, it means this, and so forth. So my understanding would be that Sri Krishna is just talking about our ordinary experience. We see in our ordinary experience the 5 elements, and I'll explain the elements in a moment. The 5 elements, and we see the different aspects of mind. That's what we know. Does anyone here experience the avyakta? Does anyone here experience the cosmic mind? Does anyone experience the mula prakriti, the ultimate seed of nature itself? No. So he's telling Arjuna that which you experience directly in your life. This is my prakriti ashtadha, my eightfold nature that is manifested as you. And so the 3 aspects of mind, which include the 4th necessarily, because you can't have ahamkara, buddhi, and manas without the chitta, which is the very stuff of the mind. So the mind in its different aspects is included, and that which composes the body, the sense organs, the brain, the pranas, all of that is included in the 5 elements. So now what are the 5 elements? That's not an important part of what he's talking about here, because he doesn't go into the 5 elements, he just mentions them. But it is an important part of Vedanta. And to many people nowadays, it just looks like bad science or the absence of science. And so the ancient sages, they just imagined 5 elements because they didn't know about the periodic table of chemical elements. But no, they weren't looking at nature in the same way as modern science does. Yes, the periodic periodic table of chemical elements is very good. It's an extraordinary arrangement of the chemical elements. If you understand the periodic table, you understand so many things of material creation because of the way that it's naturally organized. And it's a natural organization that falls into the pattern of that table because of the properties of the elements. And so it's a wonderful thing, a wonderful discovery of modern science. But the ancient seers were not interested in that. They weren't interested in taking chemicals in the laboratory and coming up with polymers and all kinds of other compounds, insecticides and fungicides and other things in order to help modern life or not help it. Depending on the chemical. They were interested in experience. And so the 5 elements are experiential. They're more experiential than the periodic table of chemical elements. The chemist knows and uses and experiences the truth of the periodic table of chemical elements, but ordinary people don't. To them, it's something they have to learn about and then say, oh, this is this and that's that. I never knew about those things before. But the 5 elements are what you're experiencing all of the time. The 5 elements are the experience of each of the 5 sense organs. So the eyes see nothing but light. And so the eye is said to perceive Agni, fire. Well, fire doesn't mean ordinary fire that you light with a match. It means the principle of radiation, that which you see with the eye. What you hear with the ear is sound, and that is akasha, space. You hear akasha with the ear. You touch vayu, wind. You feel wind, you don't see wind, but you feel the wind as it blows against you. And so that was used to symbolize the tactile sense. And taste was water, called water. The principle of taste was called water, and the principle of smell was called earth. And so all that we know of the external world is either visual, auditory, tactile, olfactory, or taste, or not gustatory, but I forget the word for taste, the technical term for taste. Anyway, we can't experience anything of the world outside of those 5 sense organs. Even if we look through a telescope or a microscope, we're still seeing light. All that I see with my eyes is light. I can't see anything else. All that I can hear with the ear is sound of different kinds, but it's all sound. All that I taste is nothing but taste. All that I smell is smell. And think about how different each one of those are. How different the sense of taste, the sense of touch is from the sense of sight. Now, normally, because we have mixed all of these 5 together, I see the book and I touch the book, and when I touch it like that, I hear a sound. And so I think of all of those all mixed up. But if you can learn to separate those out and just think of sound as sound, and think of touch just as touch, smell just as smell, taste just as taste, sight just as sight, then you see how radically different each one of those is from the other. The only 2 that are closely associated are taste and smell, but even they are different. But they're the closest in nature to each other. The others are radically different, one from another. And so these 5 elements are the only 5 ways we have of experiencing the world around us. Everything that we know of the world around us is through these 5 senses, no other way. And then the mind reasons about what we've experienced. We perceive, and then the mind thinks about it and tries to see what is the cause of these things. Why is it that things affect me this way? What's the nature of these things? How do they work together? That's what the mind does, analysis. But everything that we know of the world is based on these 5 senses, which means it's based on these 5 elements. So the 5 elements of Hinduism are the 5 ways of knowing through the 5 senses, and nothing more than that. That's what they are. So Sri Krishna is saying that this Prakriti of mind is divided 8-fold thus: earth, water, fire, air, space, and then mind, intellect, and egoism. And then verse 5, says, Apareyamitastvanyam prakritim vidhi me param jiva bhutam mahabaho yayedam dharyate jagat. Apara iyam itas tu anyam prakritim vidhi me param. So vidhi me param prakritim. Know my supreme Prakriti, which is different from these, the lower Prakriti. Apara iyam Prakriti. This which I've just explained to you, the five elements and the aspects of mind, that is my, Sri Krishna says, that is my lower Prakriti. My higher Prakriti is this, Jiva Bhutam Mahabaho, O mighty armed Arjuna, Yayedam Dharyate Jagat. My higher Prakriti has become this conscious Jiva, through which this whole universe is sustained. So my lower Prakriti is that which I know, the objects of the senses and the mind through which I know it. But I know the mind also. The mind is an object of my perception. I can see my own thinking. I can watch my own thinking. I can watch memories and images and words and thoughts coming to my mind. So all of that is objective. It's the kshetra. In technical terms, it's the field, that which I know. But the kshetrajna, the knower of the field, is the jiva. That is, each one of us is a jiva. We are a conscious individual soul who knows this universe through the mind and the five senses. And so my higher Prakriti is the consciousness within each one of us. That also is the nature of the divine. We are part of the nature of the divine. And within the macrocosm, within the microcosm, there is the macrocosm. The microcosm is built on the pattern of the macrocosm. And so we are the Prakriti of God, the nature of God. And so our lower Prakriti is the body, the sense organs, and the knowledge we get of the external world through that. And the mind, the instrument through which we know the senses and the external world. And the higher nature, which is the divine nature, also is the jiva, that is the conscious principle within us, that within me which says, I know. I am and I know that I am. That is the jivatman, the individual self. And it's that which holds this whole universe together. I won't go into that because now time is up. But where does this universe exist? It exists within me. It's floating in my awareness, which is true for each one of us. The whole universe of experience floats in my awareness, not outside. So it's my awareness which is the container. It's that which holds together. Yayedam dharyate jagat, by which this whole universe is sustained, is held. So we'll finish, verse 6 continues that idea. We'll come to that next time. There's not time to go over it now. So next time I'll go over 4, 5, and then 6 so that there's some continuity. So now let me ask if there's any question before we close. Yes, Bharat. Yeah, here, just a minute, Bharat. He'll bring the microphone. Bharat Patel here. Bharat Bhai.
Swami, I heard about the 5 elements. Body made of the 5 elements. But mind, intelligence, and ego is not part of the body. Is correct?
No, the mind.
That's the soul.
The mind, intellect, and ego are not part of the body, but they're also made of the 5 elements, because there are two aspects to the 5 elements. The tanmatra, which is the subtle element. So the mind is made of the subtle elements, and the body is made of the mahabhutas, the gross elements. So both are made out of the elements, but the mind are the subtle elements and body the gross elements. And they say that the Vedanta tradition, Yoga, Sankhya, all of the Hindu tradition says that's we can see that the mind and the sense organs are also made out of the elements, because otherwise, how would we know the external elements, the gross elements? It's because of the similar material of the two, that it's that which allows the mind to recognize external gross nature, because the mind is a subtle instrument which knows those two. Go ahead.
So to say, intelligent mind and ego is not a soul, it's the same way you can tell, right?
Good. No, it's not the soul. No, not the soul. The
So
soul.
what is the soul then?
The soul is the consciousness, the consciousness which illuminates the ego, mind, intellect, sense organs, and the external world. So the two things. One is the soul in itself, just the soul. That's just consciousness. Just the light inside of me. That's the soul. But there's also the lower soul, which is a soul which goes from birth to death, from birth to birth. When I die, my soul goes from one body to another body. I'm reborn in another body. So that soul is not just the consciousness, not just the light inside of me, but it's also the mind, intellect, ego, and sense organs, not the eyes and ears, but the power to perceive the senses. That goes from birth to birth. So we have to understand what we mean by soul. If by soul we mean what reincarnates, when I die, what is the soul that goes to another body? Then yes, that's consciousness plus mind, ego, buddhi, sense organs, and that goes to another body. Or the heart of the soul, what is the higher soul? That's just the light of consciousness, just that, without the mind, without the senses, without the body. So that's but that we realize only in deep meditation.
What is the concept made of?
It's not made of anything. Not made of anything. It's just consciousness itself. So that's why consciousness in the Hindu tradition, consciousness is separate from Prakriti. Prakriti means the nature, means that which consciousness knows. But consciousness itself is consciousness itself is divine. Consciousness itself is God. Even my consciousness. That's why when I say that I am God, what do I mean? Do I mean that this body is God? No. Do I mean that this mind is God? No. I mean that my consciousness is the same as the consciousness of God. Only I don't yet know it. And that's my misfortune. Okay. Okay, well, we'll stop here because time is up. So let me give a closing prayer and then announcements. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat. That infinite reality is full, perfect, and complete. This relative universe is full, perfect, and complete. From out of the fullness of that infinite being, the fullness of this universe has come, and yet that being remains ever the same. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all the beings of the universe. So for announcements, for those of you who are here on Sunday, I made a mistake.